Hello everyone, and welcome back to the 3T Path channel. Welcome back to our Uddhava-gita course. And so here we are in this chapter where Krishna is directly teaching Uddhava essential knowledge, tips, instructions on the path of yoga. This is great. This is like yoga basics here. Very important chapter to situate yourself on the path of yoga, to understand why we should pursue the path of spirituality. Very basic, classic argumentation of the foolishness of living a life devoid of Sanatana Dharma, devoid of the search for higher truths. So very important. And today, Krishna is going to maintain that, and we're going to be striking right at the heart of material existence again. And again, if you want to watch the previous classes and have access to the whole Uddhava-gita course, just become a member of the channel. The instructions are here in the description of the video. Become a member of the channel, and then you can access the entire Uddhava-gita course, which is certain to change your life. Now, so here we are in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th chapter, verse 18. And this again is Krishna speaking to Uddhava. Krishna says, "It is observed that within the material world, that sometimes even an intelligent person isn't happy. Similarly, sometimes even a great fool is happy. The concept of becoming happy through expertly performing material activities is simply a useless exhibition of false egotism." What a great line, isn't it? Because you might think, yeah, no, you just have to be intelligent and live your life and you can be happy. But we see that very intelligent people become miserable and make the lives of other people miserable. And if foolish people can be seen, very happy in their foolishness. So that doesn't work. So it's not about being expert at dealing with life on the material level. That won't work. You can't guide your material life in such a way that you're just going to be happy all the time. That won't work at all. Purport: it may be argued that an intelligent person can expertly perform pious activities within the material world and thus never experience suffering, since unhappiness is caused by sinful or impious activities. However, we often observe great suffering even among pious, intelligent persons, because they sometimes fail in the execution of their duty and sometimes consciously or unconsciously perform a forbidden activity. With this argument, the Lord refutes the theory that simply on the strength of material piety, one may remain perpetually happy without Krishna consciousness, without spiritual life. On the other hand, we observe that the most foolish or sinful persons sometimes experience happiness, because even those completely dedicated to sin sometimes accidentally perform pious activities by inadvertently traveling through a holy place or helping a saintly person. The material creation of God is so complex and bewildering that even those dedicated to piety sometimes commit sins, and even those dedicated to sinful life sometimes commit pious activities. Therefore, within the material world, we do not find absolute happiness or unhappiness. Rather, every conditioned soul is hovering in confusion without perfect knowledge. Piety and sin are relative material ideas that bestow relative happiness and unhappiness. Absolute happiness is experienced on the spiritual platform in full Krishna consciousness or love of God. Thus, material life is always ambiguous and relative, whereas Krishna consciousness, the path of spiritual life, is the actual platform of perfect happiness. Very nicely explained. Verse 19. Even if people know how to achieve happiness and avoid unhappiness, they still do not know the process by which death will not be able to exert its power over them. So then there's always this like, okay, let's just say like maybe you can do it really well life. You've really figured out and you have lots of happiness in material life without spiritual practice. But then death is going to come. What are you going to do about death? You know, and of course in sci-fi they have all these ideas of going beyond death. But all those ideas they have will still fail because the universe itself will cease to exist. So all matter gets compressed and ceases to exist. So there's no escaping death, not even for Lord Brahma. Purport. If the so-called intelligent materialists know the means of achieving happiness and destroying unhappiness, then they should deliver people from inevitable death. The scientists are busily working to solve this problem, but since they have completely failed, it is understood that they are not actually intelligent and that they do not know the means of achieving happiness and eliminating misery. Actually, it's interesting because of the pandemic, life expectancy has actually gone down in America. And, you know, so like we were like it was going up and it was kind of flattening out, but now it's actually gone down, you know, because of the pandemic. I don't know, it might correct itself. But the fact is, you know, we're kind of like, you know, all the science and progress of the last decades, you know, they're not pushing life expectancy up much. It's kind of reached a plateau now. It is most foolish to think that one can be happy with an axe hanging over one's neck. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita, Mrityu sarva haraschaham. I myself come before you as death and take everything away. We should not blindly ignore the disaster of material life. This is the point of these verses. We should not blindly ignore the disaster of material life, but should instead accept the Lord's causeless mercy. So very important point here being established. This is the point of these verses in general. Verse 20. Krishna continues with the topic of death. Death is not at all pleasing. That's a great line, isn't it? Death is not at all pleasing. And since everyone is exactly like a condemned man being led to the place of execution, what possible happiness can people derive from material objects or the gratification they provide? And this is the point. This is the point. When you think about it, the only certain thing is death, right? Everything else, maybe, maybe not, but death is the only certain thing in life. So you know you're going to die. How can you, this is like, you know, from the point of view, you can see like when you kind of put yourself in this position, when you put yourself in the position of Krishna, of the spiritual masters, it's like, come on, you're going to die. You know you're going to die. That is the only certain thing. So now that you know you're going to die, why would you not search for something beyond death? Why would you not work on something else which won't be taken away by death? How can you be within the same realm of things which death will take away? Because you might say, oh, but I don't believe in spirituality, I don't believe in God or soul, for me everything is just matter. But, you know, but there is this other thing, there's being offered, people have been practicing, people are experiencing this other level of existence, which isn't directly just matter. You might say it is, but maybe it's not, because, there's arguments, we say it's spiritual, it's not matter. But I mean, how would you not work on this other thing? It doesn't make any sense. So the point of view is like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, again, you're a condemned man, you know, the famous last meal. Like, come on, how can you really enjoy the last meal, you know? I mean, ugh. You know, you're about to be killed. It's like, what? Oh, yummy, you know, this rice is so yummy. It's like, you're about to be killed. I mean, who cares? It's more like Parikshit Maharaj, who's listening to the Bhagavatam. Like, he found out he was going to die in 7 days. He's like, okay, no more meals. I don't want anything. I don't want to eat. I'm going to die in 7 days. It's like, how can you think of eating? You know, Maharaj Parikshit was like, no, I'll just fast and listen. I just want spiritual knowledge. So anyway, so this is Krishna's argument. Purport: it is customary throughout the world that a condemned man is offered a sumptuous last meal. For the condemned man, however, such a feast is a chilling reminder of his imminent death, and therefore he cannot enjoy it. Similarly, no sane human being can be satisfied in material life because death is standing near and may strike at any moment. If one is sitting in one's living room with a deadly snake at one side, knowing that at any moment the poisonous fangs might pierce the flesh, how can one sit peacefully and watch television or read a book? Similarly, unless one is more or less crazy, one cannot be enthusiastic or even peaceful in material life. Knowledge of the inevitability of death should encourage one to become determined in spiritual life. Classic arguments. Wonderful stuff, isn't it? I love it. I hope you like it too. Verse 21. The material happiness of which we hear, such as promotion to heavenly planets, for celestial enjoyment, you know, going to Swarga Loka, which was the goal of mundane Vedic religion, of the rituals, you know, of the Vedas, the rituals, that was the goal, to achieve Swarga. It's just like that material happiness we have already experienced. Both are polluted by jealousy, envy, decay, and death. Therefore, just as an attempt to raise crops becomes fruitless if there are many problems, like crop disease, insect plague, or drought, similarly, the attempt to attain material happiness either on earth or on the heavenly planet Swarga is always fruitless because of innumerable obstacles. That's the point. Because then you might say, okay, Krishna, so maybe I can't be happy. This is for the Vedic crowd, you know, not the modern crowd, but like back in the days where Krishna was speaking this, like, okay, Krishna, so we can't be happy in this earth. We know that. That's why we're going to Swarga. That's why we're doing these rituals, because we're going to Swarga Loka, you know, we're going to live like the gods, the devas. We're going to be right there with Indra, with Thor, you know, we're going to be there. And then Krishna say, no, look, it's the same thing. It's the same pleasure. And there they also have jealousy, envy, decay, and death. Of course they do. And that's an interesting thing of the Greek culture, the Greek contribution, when we have all those stories of the same demigods, the nature gods. You know, Indra is just Zeus, and etc. So you have all those stories, and those, you can see the gods are like, you know, full of jealousy and anger and envy, and you know, they're miserable just like we are. They just have more power and beauty and live longer, but in the end, it's the same thing. Purport. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments as follows on this verse. Ordinarily, if there is no specific impediment, agriculture endeavors will yield their fruits. If, however, there's a defect in the seed, or if the soil is too salty or barren, or if there's drought, plague, excessive rain or heat out of season, or if there are disturbances caused by animals, birds, or insects, then agricultural activities will not yield the desired harvest. Similarly, those who are expert in analyzing the material world see that the heavenly situation offered in the Vedas are not basically different from life on earth. By the interaction of conditioned souls, there will inevitably be jealousy as one becomes distinguished as superior and another as inferior. By the power of time, these positions are reversed, and therefore violence and intrigue disturb life even on the heavenly planets. In fact, the attempt to promote oneself to the heavenly planets is itself full of problems and disturbances. Very difficult. One should therefore understand that the kingdom of God, Vaikuntha, is transcendental to the limitations and disturbances imposed by the laws of material nature in this world. If one wrongly concludes that such imperfections are also present in the kingdom of God, then one will be polluted by material contamination. So this is an entire purport written by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Verse 22. If one performs Vedic sacrifices and fruitive rituals, the ones that would take you to Swargaloka, without any mistake or contamination, so they have to be done really well. That's the thing about these Vedic sacrifices. It's very famous for that. And even to this day, if you approach and study those Brahminical cultures and societies, there's still some in India who have carefully preserved the Vedas and the chanting, and the children go to school and they memorize, and they have their little hand mudra signs as they chant, and they have the right rhythm of the mantra, and you have the right pronunciation, and so there's a whole thing. It's like the mantra, you have to chant these verses in the right rhythm, the right intonation, because it's very tricky. Sanskrit is very tricky, if you pronounce an A a bit too long, it's another word, because it's another letter, okay, that's just two different letters. And if you put that one, it's like it's a completely different meaning. So even like in the Bhagavatam, there are stories like that where, somebody tries to do a fancy mantra to bring forth a powerful fiery demon, but then he gets one little syllable wrong, so the fiery demon comes after him instead. Instead of going after his enemy, he just pronounces one little thing wrong, and then it's like, oh, damn, I got that, so that's it, and then he gets killed. So, Vedic sacrifice, very difficult. Lifetime training, like from early childhood, training for years and years and years, memorizing the song, the harmony, very complicated. So anyway, and of course there was the other aspects of the rituals too. You had to have like the right thing to offer. It's really interesting if you look deeply. It's like, no, you have ghee, ghee, right? The clarified butter. But it's like, it has to be ghee taken from a brown cow. So like, where did the milk come from? What kind of cow was it? And then you're using this, and it's like, oh yeah, and this thing we're using to prepare the ground for the ritual has been taken from this kind of tree with this kind of wood taken down at this time of the moon. And it's all these things that were really like super crazy details that you can't even imagine. So very difficult. But let's just say, Krishna says, if one performs Vedic sacrifices and fruitive rituals without any mistake or contamination, one will achieve a heavenly situation in the next life. So Krishna says, yeah, it works. I'm not saying the Vedas are lying. He says, it works. If you do it just right, you'll get this heavenly situation. Your next birth will be in Swarga. But even this result, which is only achieved by perfect performance of fruitive rituals will be vanquished by time. Now hear of this. So that's it. And Krishna says, of course, in Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says something very similar. Krishna says, look, Uddhava, don't even bother with the flowery words. He uses this expression, the flowery words of the Vedas. Don't even bother with that. Don't give ears to that. Why? Because if you go there, you'll come back. And that's the rule. I mean, that's not like a secret. That's the rule. Oh yeah, sure, you're on earth. You can do these things to get a birth in Swarga. Okay, true. But what's also true is that once your credit runs out, you have to take birth on earth again. It's all about credit. It's just pious karmic credits. They run out. You know, the bad credits run out as well. That's why we have bad periods, and then the bad period is over. It's because, okay, you've burned the bad karma. Great. And now you've got this good karma, but then that ends. You know, you've seen that, right? You had this nice situation and it goes. You had a nice relationship, but then it ends. You know, you had a nice friend that they die. You know. So good things come to an end. And then, of course, Krishna takes this further, way over in chapter 15 of Bhagavad Gita. He says, look, cycles. It's always this, cycles. So why are you going to stay in here? Cycling through things, you know, the universe is created, destroyed, you're up, you're down, you know, the wheel of fortune, samsara, wheel. Sometimes you're on top, middle, bottom, middle, top, middle, bottom. This is it. This is material life, always changing, impermanent. So, even if you achieve this result, it will be vanquished in time. So just forget that path forward, basically. He tells Arjuna, and he's now telling Uddhava the same thing. Forget it. It won't work, because you'd just be back here. You started here, you did this whole difficult thing, and if you do it all right, you go there, and then you're going to end up here again. Purport. The word gachati means going. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna states, agamapayino nitya. All material experiences, good or bad, come and go. Therefore, the word gachati refers to the disappearance of the results of even the most meticulously performed fruitive sacrifices. Any material situation, from the worst to the best, is imperfect. Thus, one should strive only for pure Krishna consciousness. Verse 23. If on earth one performs sacrifices for the satisfaction of the demigods, he goes to the heavenly planets, where, just like a demigod, he enjoys all the heavenly pleasures he has earned by his performances. Verse 24. Having achieved the heavenly planets, Swarga, the performer of ritualistic sacrifices travels in a glowing airplane. This is nice, right? This is like you thinking, oh, this is good stuff. Don't get too attracted. It's funny, sometimes we do classes and we talk about Swarga, and then you can see people going, yeah, that's what I want. Because, you know, these are Western people that haven't heard of Swarga. They're like, whoa, that's what I want. And they completely forget the spiritual message, because now they're aware that there's this amazing material option they hadn't been told about before. So please don't fall into that trap. But anyway, so you travel in a glowing airplane, which he obtains as the result of his piety on earth. So he's like a first class, you know, super glowing jet to the to the heavenly kingdoms of the demigods. Pretty good stuff. Being glorified by songs sung by the Gandharvas and dressed in wonderfully charming clothes, he enjoys life surrounded by heavenly goddesses. Oh no, this is terrible, right? A verse like this, you're like, okay, Gary, forget this Uddhava-gita stuff. We want to know how to get this. No, you don't. That wasn't the point. Verse 25, accompanied by heavenly women, the enjoyer of the fruits of sacrifice goes on pleasure rides in a wonderful airplane, which is decorated with circles of tinkling bells, which flies wherever he desires. We're talking about a spaceship, a pleasure cruising spaceship. Which is amazing, right? Because this stuff was written way back before people were like airplanes, like this is interesting. There's like spaceships and airplanes, but it's one of the cool things of the Vedas, So here Krishna is saying, look, you get this pleasure spaceship, with like these super hot women. Their spaceship will go wherever you want. It's got like little tinkling bells. It's got like, it's just like we say now, all the bells and whistles. So it's got all the bells and whistles, and it'll take you anywhere, wherever you desire, being relaxed, comfortable, and happy in the heavenly pleasure gardens. He does not consider that he is exhausting the fruits of his piety and will soon fall down to the mortal world again. By mortal, they mean like this earthly, grimy level we're at now. This is the yikes, this is the rough, grimy level, mortal world we're in now. So, sounds great, right? Yeah, spaceship, and it's funny, because they say, it really is like free sex. There's other verses that give you this idea that it's kind of free sex. There's no like, wife and you only have sex within marriage. No, it's like the culture within the demigods in Swarga. It's like they live so long, they live for hundreds of millions of years, so they're obviously not going to be married. They might even be, but it's like, it's whatever, it's kind of like free relationships, so that's the norm. Even with like mother, because it doesn't matter, like mother, it's like, who can remember like the person gave birth to you 100 million years ago and they're still young, it's like, it's like, so it's free. So anyway, so having this stuff. If you're interested in Swarga though, remember that Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita that if you practice Bhagavad-gita, if you practice yoga, and you fail to achieve perfection in this life, he says if you do it with a little bit of practice and you fail, you go to Swarga. So if you want to go to Swarga, you should practice yoga anyway, because if you fail in your goal of yoga, you get Swarga as the what's it called? The conciliation prize, like the second prize. You get that anyway. Okay. Verse 26. Until his pious results are used up, the performer of sacrifice enjoys life in the heavenly planets. When the pious results are exhausted, however, he falls down from the pleasure gardens of heaven, being moved against his desire by the force of eternal time. So it's great while it lasts, and then you're kicked out. Just like when you go on vacation, you go to some great hotel, you're in some spa, maybe some resort, you're having a great time, but then what happens? They basically kick you out when your money is gone. You finish paying, and I'm sorry, sir, thank you very much. come back some other time, and you're kicked out. It's like, no, I want to stay in my room. No, you can't stay in your room. They'll call up security and throw you out. You get kicked out, same thing happens in the heavenly worlds. Okay, very good. So let's stop here. I hope you enjoy this trip through the universe, through the options, and that you maintain your focus on your spiritual path. Have the rest of your day with lots of peace and lots of love. Hare Krishna.